Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Technology That Powers Your Mission, IT Management for Not-for-Profit Organizations. My name is Amanda Maglish, and I'll be introducing today's presentation from Ray Information Services. This webinar has been designed specifically for not-for-profit leaders who want to optimize their IT infrastructure, strengthen their cybersecurity posture, and maximize their technology investments, all while staying within budget. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items to cover. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please enter them into the chat box on your screen. We'll address as many questions as possible during our Q&A session at the end. To be respectful of everyone's time, we may not be able to answer every question live, so following today's webinar, our team will review all submitted questions and send out comprehensive answers with our follow-up email on Monday. You'll find additional helpful resources in the handout section, and we'll also be sending you both the presentation slides and a recording of today's session in the follow-up email. We're pleased to offer 1 hour of CPE credit for today's webinar. To receive your credit, just scan the QR code on your screen to register your attendance and provide the 3 code word numbers that will appear throughout the presentation. And now, without further ado, I'm excited to introduce today's presenters, Jeff Rapp, Travis Strong, and Steve Grossenbaugh from our Ray Information Services team. Jeff Rapp is a principal with Ray and the director of Ray Information Services. Jeff has been helping nonprofit organizations manage and secure their information technology for 30 years. Travis Strong is a principal with Ray Information Services. Travis's near 20-year career has focused on IT risk management and cybersecurity for organizations, including not-for-profits. And Steve Grossenbaugh is the business development manager for Ray Information Services. Steve has been providing technology solutions to Ohio's not-for-profits for nearly 20 years. Jeff, Travis, and Steve, thank you so much for being here today. Let's dive in.
Great, thanks Amanda, and thanks everybody for joining us here this afternoon and spending your valuable time with us. Really hope you get a lot out of the presentation today, and as Amanda mentioned, please enter your questions there on the screen, and we will do our best to answer those either during the session here or follow up with you and make sure we get answers to you afterwards. The agenda for today's presentation is going to start out with cybersecurity for not-for-profits. We're going to talk a lot about current threats that are out there, also just things that you can do within your organization to help protect yourself. We'll talk about the risk management strategies as well that you can look at to make sure that you're positioning yourself and your organization as best you can to prevent some of the attacks and threats that are out there today. We'll talk a little bit about cyber insurance, what to look for in policies, what to watch out for, and ways to maximize those policies for your organization. And then we'll dive into just some IT best practices, which will focus on some more operational areas of IT in general, as well as talk about some grants and maybe how to maximize those opportunities for the organization. And lastly, we're going to talk about, I think, one of the hottest topics out there in the news today and in the technology world is artificial intelligence. A little bit about how you can utilize it and what to watch out for as well. To get started with the presentation, we're going to hand it over to Travis Strong, and he's going to take the first couple of items here on the agenda for us. Travis?
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it, and welcome everybody. You know, before we get to this poll question here, couple of things that I wanted to just highlight. You know, I spent a lot of time in cybersecurity, and for not-for-profits, I mean, really for any organization, cybersecurity isn't just an IT issue. I think a lot of organizations think it is, but it's actually broader than that. I mean, for this industry in particular, it's a mission issue, right? And you rely, I mean, all of you joined on the call here rely in some way, right, on donors, volunteers, communities, or you know, others to serve and protect the information. That's all in part of, you know, protecting that mission. You know, unfortunately, cyber criminals know that not-for-profits often have limited budgets, lean IT teams, and I mean that makes this industry an attractive target, unfortunately, for cyber attacks. And in fact, you know, many attacks today are aimed not at the largest organizations, but at, you know, smaller ones, small, medium-sized businesses, those that have, you know, are mission-driven, those attackers, they see that, or they kind of assume that the defenses for those organizations will be weaker, so they see them as an opportunity for attack. And the impact of an attack or a breach or something like that, it could be devastating. We're not here to paint doom and gloom with everybody. That's definitely not what we're here for, but it could be devastating, right? You could have information stolen, a ransomware attack of some sort, may lock up critical systems or data, or even reputational damage that, makes people think twice about giving again. And a single incident can undo, years of trust building and, all that you've put into that business to build that trust. So I say some bad news there, but the good news is cybersecurity doesn't have to be overwhelming or expensive. Many of the most effective steps that we can put in place are low cost. Some of them are even no cost. And with a little bit of awareness and some best practices, not-for-profits can dramatically lower their risk. And we're going to talk about some of those things here shortly. So as we get into this, we're going to explore some of the threats that are prevalent today and some of those simple defenses and risk mitigation techniques that you can put in place, and how building a culture of cybersecurity can protect your mission. So I think we can get into that first poll question.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time. We are going to have a few poll questions throughout the presentation. They are completely confidential, so feel free to just be open and honest. First poll question is, how confident are you in your organization's current cybersecurity posture? Take 30 seconds to 60 seconds and think about it. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Some good and some work to do.
Yeah, I think this is pretty standard from what we see in our interactions with clients, just not in the not-for-profit industries, but also just industry in general. It's a pretty widespread across not very confident all the way up to very confident. So I think this is pretty representative of what we see day in and day out in the organizations that we work with.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as we get into the next kind of the dialogue, right, on this topic, I think it might help a lot of folks, or most everyone that, answered the poll or didn't answer the poll, just take some things back to your organization and challenge some areas, ask some questions, and see, maybe to edify that confidence level a little bit. Hopefully some of these things will resonate with you.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, code word, yep. If you're participating in CPE, you'll want to enter that code word 266 into the conferences IO. All right, so let's get into this topic a little bit more. Now, as I mentioned just a little bit ago, a minute or so ago, for a not-for-profit, a cyber attack, it's not just an IT problem. It can directly disrupt day-to-day operations of your organization. Imagine not being able to access your whatever it is, your donor database or something like that right before a fundraising campaign, or having your email system locked up by ransomware, or when you're coordinating a big event with a bunch of volunteers or something like that. These disruptions, they can slow down your critical programs. They can delay services to the community. One of the things too is they can erode the trust of donors and beneficiaries. Amanda, you can go ahead and build that out. That's absolutely fine. In some cases, recovery from a single attack, it can take weeks. And what that does then is it diverts resources away from the mission's goals, right? So that just speaks to just that overall kind of impact that is broader than just IT, right? It actually impacts the organization as a whole. I'm sure a lot of you on the call today, handle important data, whatever it is, donor data, payment information, or other sensitive personal information of of people, beneficiaries, volunteers, or what have you. Attackers are after that information, and that's why this industry and organizations in this industry are an attractive target, primarily because of the information that you have at your fingertips. Now, you may not think of yourself as a target, but the cyber criminals, they see it differently. And speaking to what I just talked about, right, with small, medium-sized businesses, they see those as low-hanging fruit. You know, most organizations in this industry operate on limited budgets, often have lean IT teams or no IT team, and often are using, you know, older, outdated systems. We'll talk a little bit about more some of those areas later on. But, you know, that combination of having sensitive data plus weaker defenses makes not-for-profits an especially, you know, appealing target for a bad guy. And cyber criminals also recognize that mission-driven organizations can feel, you know, an enormous pressure to potentially pay a ransom quickly so that they can get back online and get, you know, get services started back up. And downtime, I mean, they know that downtime means missed opportunities for you all, like around the fundraising or potentially leads to canceled services and just that reputational aspect with the community. I mean, I could probably speak for a lot of you that, you know, trust is a significant part of your mission, I am sure. People believe in your mission and trust the organization to be a good steward of the resources and the data and information that you have. A cyber attack, you know, that exposes that information or halts programs or something like that, that can quickly erode trust. So that speaks to that reputation side a lot. You know, people may hesitate to give again or donate again. Partners may question the organization's reliability. Others may lose confidence in receiving, you know, support from the organization. You know, even if systems are restored, reputational damage, it could linger for years, right? There's been plenty of people who have used the quote. The one that comes to my mind is Warren Buffett, right? It takes 20 years or whatever to build trust, but you can lose it in an instant. And that kind of speaks to that reputational side at all. And, you know, in the not-for-profit world, damaged trust often translates directly into diminished impact. And one of our goals here is to not let that happen, but and just to educate you all on this topic and some things you can do to protect yourselves. So moving into the cyber threats, and you can move along, Amanda, to that next slide. So I want to spend just a few minutes kind of building out some of the things that we're seeing going on out there in the world, maybe to give you a little bit more background. So myself, Jeff, and Steve, we spend a lot of time in this space and read all kinds of information, all kinds of, we call it threat intelligence, right? Things that are going on out there globally that we need to pay attention to from a cybersecurity standpoint. One of those areas is ransomware attacks that you see up in the left-hand corner there. So ransomware attacks, they remain one of the most prevalent attacks, not just for not-for-profits, but for any organization in today's world. In that area, basically what happens, attackers find a way to lock your files and steal your files, and then they demand a payment to either unlock them or prevent them from being disclosed. You know, for not-for-profits, this could mean losing access to that data, losing access to your payroll system, or, you know, certain program records at the most inopportune or, you know, worst possible time, right, is usually when this stuff happens. And, you know, there's, I mean, paying ransom demand, you're never guaranteed on whether you're going to get that data back or that the bad guy is going to really hold to their promises. And again, this is an area that a lot of organizations are targeted by right now. That double extortion tactics that you see, that last bullet in that ransomware attack section, that's the basically the attack pattern where the threat actor not only encrypts the information that you may have sitting on a server or something on your computer, something like that, but before they encrypt that information, they actually steal it. So there's basically a double ransom or a double extortion tactic that's being used. That's been going on for a few years now, and not necessarily new, but definitely something that targets this industry.
Hey, Travis, before you move on to the next one real quick, maybe I'm stealing thunder for later, but how long have you seen organizations take before they're up and running or recover from an event, and maybe just in general, some cost around that for an organization?
Certainly, and I'll start by saying this is this is the tried and true way of answering that question, right? Jeff is saying it depends, and Jeff knows what I'm talking about when I say it depends, because it really depends on the state of your ability to recover. What we see is, regardless of the state, it's going to take some time. That time could be 4 hours, it could be 4 weeks, it could be 4 months. And it really is organization dependent. It depends on, how good are your backup and recovery, data backup and disaster recovery processes, what's your incident response look like, how quickly can you actually respond to an incident if and when it happens? Do you have the right people involved in that process for you to be able to, respond quickly and get back up and running? We've seen organizations where they've been, hit with ransomware, and we've, kind of jumped in and helped them to look at a data backup and restore that, but still it's going to take hours for that to happen. We've worked with organizations that have been down for a week, and they've been, they've lost production, operations have sort of paused for a week. So it really does depend there, but that's just some data points there around that piece that I wanted to hone in on. Good question. Now on the data breaches side, somewhat related, but also could be very different. This is all around sensitive information, and when that falls into the wrong hands, that goes back to, big reputation piece, right? It can damage trust and put individuals at risk of fraud. If it's sensitive information, quite honestly, I know it doesn't necessarily apply to this industry, but like a manufacturing company, if they've got certain intellectual property around a widget or something that they manufacture, well, if that information is stolen, that could also be impactful from a data breach standpoint to that organization. So sensitive information is really important to protect. Breaches often lead to fines, legal costs, and just that long-term reputational damage. Now, this should have been first probably on the slide, but social engineering, that's still probably the biggest tactic that the threat actors are using right now to basically mess with us, mess with the human is what they're trying to do, right? Social engineering is when attackers trick people into giving up information or access to information or systems. A lot of it is done through phishing emails, but a lot of it's done through other mechanisms as well. We see a lot of, it's called phishing, voice phishing, right? Where, they're using phone calls to try and trick us, or social media and gathering information about people through social media and trying to target those individuals. So we see social engineering happening in a lot of different fronts. They could, come through, as those fake invoices or fake contract documents or some other kind of documents. There's a variety of different forms and fashions that the bad guys are using to try and trip us up from that social engineering aspect. This is an ever-changing space. They're getting more sophisticated as well. Gone are the days where we're seeing the emails with just terrible grammar and punctuation and stuff like that. What we're seeing now are very polished emails and very polished, grammatically written emails, right, that the attackers are using. So it's harder to kind of detect those things, and it's easier to trust them because they look more professional. So that's another focus for us. And since you rely heavily, I'm sure, on email and volunteer communication, social engineering is one of the most important and most common and successful attack methods being used today.
Travis, I think you mentioned those polished emails. We're going to talk a lot about how, organizations can use AI here in a few minutes, right? But cyber criminals are using AI now as well, right, to generate some of those phishing attack. That's one of the ways that they're making big leaps in that polished format of those communications to really sucker people into clicking on things they shouldn't.
You're 100% accurate. Absolutely. Now, I've said bad guys, I don't know how many times on this on this webinar already. There's the insider threat that we also need to be mindful of. So that's the person that works for the organization or is a volunteer for the organization or something like that. The threats don't always come from the outside. So this, again, it could be an employee, a volunteer, a contractor, either intentionally or by mistake. It's an accident. You know, those things happen. So it's an area of exposed risk, right? They could expose sensitive data. You know, click on a phishing link. That's usually, I mean, one of the front doors to a cyber attack is by, you know, something that a human does, like clicking on a phishing link or mishandling the access that they've been given to whatever system or data that they've been given access to. So human error and those accidents actually is a huge component to cybersecurity. Is just those mishaps that the human does, whether it's, you know, sending an email with a bunch of sensitive information to the wrong person or to the wrong organization. That's an example of an insider threat activity that actually could lead to a data breach. On the legacy system side, the bottom left there, so many Jeff, I think, might be talking about this here in a little bit as well, but many not-for-profits use older software and systems because budgets are tight. We get it, we understand. The unfortunate part about, you know, using those old systems is most of those outdated systems, they aren't getting the security patches and the security fixes from the vendors anymore, which makes them actually a low-hanging fruit for attackers to go after, because attackers know, they're called vulnerabilities in those systems, know how to compromise those systems through those vulnerabilities. So it makes those legacy systems just an open door basically to cyber threats. And then I always use, so for the bottom right, the third parties, cloud computing, and supply chain aspect, I always like to think about, or to kind of talk about this as we can't just be concerned with what goes on within our four walls. For any organization, you have to actually think about what goes on outside of your four walls now. And that's where this topic really comes into play, is you are only as strong as your weakest link, kind of to use that age-old, you know, philosophy. So if you're relying heavily on some third party, whether it's a vendor or some other organization of some sort, if they have, you know, some sort of attack or cyber incident, it's likely going to impact you in some way. So just our dependence and reliance on whether it's a third-party software platform, an accounting tool, a cloud storage solution, something like that we use to operate, if those vendors aren't secure, our organizations are going to inherit some level of risk there. And it's one weak link basically in the supply chain that could put our entire organizations at risk. So it's just something to be mindful there, is that it extends outside of our four walls. We gotta be thinking about that. So I don't want to just tell you about all the bad things that are happening in the world here. I want to actually give you some things that you can take away. And on the next slide here, there's a list of, next one, Amanda, please. On the next slide, yeah, there you go. And this is just a list of, you know, strategies that you all can take away and strongly consider implementing or having a conversation with your organization just around, what do we do about this, right? What do we do about these items? This isn't an exhaustive list, I'll tell you. This list could probably be 100 items long. It's a summary, but these are the key areas that you should focus on to mitigate against some of those, or a lot of those threats facing your organizations. At the top, there's risk assessment. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but at the top is risk assessment and prioritization. That's a great place to start. Helps you identify where you may have weaknesses in your security and in your internal control processes. And that risk assessment can really help you prioritize where you should focus your efforts to solidify your defenses. And then some other areas too. I mean, I'm going to emphasize this until I'm blue in the face, but training people is actually really important. A lot of people, a lot of organizations downplay that, but I can tell you earlier I said they can be your weakest link. We want them to be our strongest defense, because that's where a lot of this stuff is coming through, is, you know, the attackers are attacking the human, the social engineering pieces. So training staff and training people is so important, and it provides such a great prevention mechanism if your employees, your people that work for you, if they're adequately trained. Trained to spot and report suspicious activities and just prevent accidents from happening. As part of that training too, so just making sure you've got some basics and fundamentals in place, making sure everybody's using things like multi-factor authentication, strong passwords, all that stuff, it's still very important. Jeff's question earlier about like how long it takes to respond, so making sure you've got regular and tested backups. It's not just good to have backups, but making sure you can test those backups and make sure that they're usable in the event that you need them. That's really important. Only having the information and the data that you need to run the business, that is also important. So if you don't need certain data, especially on the sensitive data side, get rid of it. Just you don't need it, get rid of it, right? We already talked about keeping systems patched and updated. That's really important as well. But one other thing I want to, in the third-party risk as well, we talked about that on the last slide, but just emphasizing the need to assess your third parties, make sure that they've got the right security and controls in place is really imperative in this area. Again, just how cybersecurity kind of extends beyond your four walls. One other important item is the last item on this list. And, for a not-for-profit, every hour and every dollar counts. We understand that. Partnering with professionals in IT and cybersecurity means you don't have to choose between protecting your mission and running it, okay? Instead of stretching thin resources on complex technology and security, you could get enterprise level protection at a fraction of the cost and the peace of mind that your data, your systems, your reputation is safeguarded just by partnering with those professionals. And in short, working with a professional technology partner lets your staff focus on what they do best, and that's serving your mission and serving your communities and your partners that you work with. I'm going to hand it back over to Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, if you go back to that slide real quick, Amanda. I think one of the key things with this to keep in mind is that we recognize that you may not know how to understand whether or not your organization has all these things implemented, right? You may not have that visibility into it. The key thing I think is to work with either if you have internal IT or your external partner, or to engage with somebody to help you walk through some of these things and help you understand where you're at and what gaps you have as part of that risk assessment process. But I want to give a quick example to kind of put this maybe a little bit in context, or maybe two of them, right? Travis mentioned not looking at just your four walls earlier, right? I think that's key, because one of the things that we're seeing happen more often with nonprofits is they tend to almost forget about their websites, right? Because it's kind of outside, it's just always up and running. There's not a lot of attention to it. And we've worked with a few clients and organizations lately that found themselves in a situation where they haven't paid attention to their website. We had one organization that came to us that their website was actually prompting people that were visiting to download malicious files and spread an infection. And it was because they weren't patching and they didn't have somebody managing that website and making sure that it was up to date and secure. So don't think about it just inside of your four walls or your computers that you're working off of. You really do need to look at all the applications and things that your organization utilizes and extend to those things. The other quick example to give is on data backup and disaster recovery. Travis hit it on the nail on the head there where he said, it's not just about having the backups, it's about testing it also. I can't tell you the number of times over my career here, especially in the last 10 years, where we've gone into a situation where we're helping somebody out where they've thought their backups were good. They may have had a third party that they were working with that was telling them, hey, we're backing up all your data, it's backed up nightly. And then they end up in a situation where there's ransomware or a hardware failure or an environment situation, and they find out that their backups aren't actually running or they haven't been tested. And they're put in a bind because now they're trying to struggle to rebuild information that might have gaps of weeks or months, and I've even helped somebody that had no backups after an event, although they thought they were supposed to. So that testing piece and then asking those questions of the people that are handling your backups, right? How do you know the backups are good? Are you being shown that? Have you tested them recently? And not just have you tried to restore one file, but have you tried to restore our entire server? And then extend that also to your third parties and ask them those questions. So just something to keep in mind as you're working through this is, asking those probing questions in all these areas and having that partner like Travis mentioned to work with is really important as well. Right.
Yeah, and Jeff, that relates directly back to your initial question you asked me, right? Is like, how long does it typically take to respond? And that's why I said it depends, because it really depends on the state of your backups and your recovery and incident response procedures for sure.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
thanks for being in there. I was going to bring up that website example, but
yeah, no problem. No problem.
I'm going to hand it over. Jeff's going to take the lead here. He's going to talk a little. This is actually a topic we get a lot of questions on, is cyber insurance, and he'll also talk through some best practices and resources.
Yeah, it's one of those topics that I hate to talk about, but love to talk about as well. It's almost a catch-22 type situation for organizations is, do I pay extra for my cyber insurance money or premiums to have that coverage, especially if I'm spending on the cybersecurity side and I think I'm protected? For maybe some of those people that felt very confident about where their cybersecurity is today, should I be spending on insurance or not? I kind of look at this as a situation where cyber insurance has also kind of made it more profitable for attackers, because organizations are able to pay out those fees for ransomware and stuff. So, with all that being said, we do think cyber insurance is important to keep your businesses operating if something happens. And so I'm going to talk through a little bit about, do you need insurance, and maybe some policy red flags and a couple other items here. So as Travis mentioned, your data is high value to attackers. A lot of nonprofits are working with sensitive data of some type, whether that might be protected health information, whether that's donor data, maybe they're processing credit card information. All that information is high value to attackers. So they are targets for attackers to try and gain access to that data and try and use that data. You do need to evaluate the financial risk of your organization. So when you're looking at cyber insurance, you need to think about, hey, what happens if I am down for a week? Or what happens if my data could be exposed? And what is that financial risk to the organization? If it is significant, or if you think you're going to struggle to be able to bring your organization back up after a security event, cyber insurance is probably going to make sense for your organization. And there is that saying that I think you hear a lot anymore about cyber attacks, that it's not if anymore, it's when. These things are happening, and they are happening to smaller and smaller organizations because those organizations don't have the funds necessarily to spend on cybersecurity like large organizations do. So we are seeing that transition of attacks going from large organizations to being more prevalent in smaller organizations right now. Some policy red flags to think about as you're evaluating cyber insurance is to look at, first of all, look at the limits against business size and need, right? So a lot of times you'll see the limits listed out in the policy, and it's important to look at those limits and make sure that those limits are high enough, but not too high, for what you think you might need to be able to recover from some type of an incident. And this is where a professional that deals with cyber insurance, maybe somebody within your insurance group that you work with, can help you kind of evaluate that and let you know what policy limits you should be looking at based upon the financial risk to the organization. Going back to Travis's comment about third parties, don't forget about third party coverage if you're going to look at cyber insurance. Many cyber insurance policies anymore can offer the ability to cover impacts to your organization if a third party partner or customer of yours is impacted, and that then impacts your business. I know the move for a lot of our nonprofit organizations is to host their primary applications, whether that's fundraising, donor management, EHR solutions. Those are now being hosted at a third-party location, right? If your cyber insurance does not have third-party coverage in it, and something happens to that third party, you may not be able to recoup any losses associated with that event if your policy does not cover third parties. So that's an important piece to look at in your policy. The other thing you have to remember is that anytime you sign up for cyber insurance, that cyber insurance company is going to ask you to attest to the fact that you have certain things in place. So I'm going to go through some of those things in a few minutes here. But if you have attested and you filled out an application and you have said that we have things like backup or multi-factor authentication, if you have an event and you don't actually have those things in place, your cyber insurance is not going to cover the event. I always tell our clients that one of the first things a cyber insurance's responsibility is to see if they actually have to pay out on a claim, right? You're going to go through, in an event, you're going to go through a forensics process. And yes, they are trying to find out how it happened so they can help you understand that and put protections in place so it doesn't happen again. But their primary thing they're looking at in that forensics process is to identify whether or not they have to make a claim, they have to pay out that claim with the insurance. And we're seeing that more and more is if you're not doing those things that you said you were doing on that application, those claims are getting denied when they get submitted. That also goes into the last item here is checking the definitions, right? Just making sure you understand and working with a professional to be able to understand what's in that policy to make sure that there's not something that might prevent you from submitting a claim that you're not aware of in that policy. Amanda, go ahead and move on to the next slide for me, please. So which policy is best? I put this question in there because a lot of organizations we talk to says that their general liability insurance has a cyber insurance rider in it. And for some organizations, depending on what that financial risk is that I talked about earlier, that general liability cyber insurance rider might be sufficient for the organization. However, they're typically pretty limited and only cover certain things happening. And so you need to evaluate and not just look at that as having, yes, I've got cyber insurance in my general liability plan, that's going to be good for us. You really need to evaluate that and look to see if that is the right solution, or you need to look at a standalone cyber insurance policy that is going to have more requirements that you have to follow to be able to get covered, but is going to give you the coverage your organization might need. The other thing to look for in a good policy is that some of them will include add-on services or value-add services like incident response. They may help you through a situation, right? Or pre-breach services like risk assessments or vulnerability tests that can help you identify where your gaps are and what you need to do to strengthen your security posture. So I really love those insurance plans because, especially for nonprofits, because instead of engaging with a third party, risk assessment, which might be the right thing for your organization, you can use some of these plans to help you at least identify at the top level where you have some risk that you have to address. So look for those plans to offer some of those incentives or those value adds in them. And the other thing to keep in mind with insurance is you want to be able to minimize your premiums in that cyber insurance policy as much as possible. And that application that you're going to answer is going to have some things on there that are going to impact your premiums depending on how you answer them. This goes back to making sure that you're doing what you say you're doing that I mentioned earlier. But some of those things that you can help reduce your insurance premiums are making sure that you have multi-factor authentication, right? Which is, most of you are familiar, like you log into a banking site and ask you to enter a code from your phone, right? Or you're logging into your email and it might prompt you to ask or to answer whether or not it's you logging in. That's MFA. You need that on your email, and you need that on any VPN or remote access into your data or your network. That'll help you reduce your premiums, and a lot of insurance companies won't even cover you anymore if you don't have that. Email filtering, security filtering is important. Regular backups and testing is a question, and that can help you lower your costs on the premium. Also, 24/7 security monitoring is a question that they're asking now in applications that can also help you reduce your premium. And then managing your privileged accounts or administrative accounts in your environment is something that can help you lower your premium costs as well. So that's a little bit about cyber insurance. I know there's a lot there. Sometimes it's a boring topic, but a pretty important topic for you to think about as you're looking at cybersecurity.
Hey, Jeff, one thing I thought I'd chime in on, sometimes I think you've probably heard this too. I've heard it a time or two, but, an organization may say, I've got cyber insurance, I'm good to go. It's like the one and only control that, they're thinking about is just cyber insurance. But when I hear that, while that's all well and good, like there's a bunch of things that I look at cyber insurance is almost like that's the last resort. If you need it, if you need it. There's a bunch of other preventive measures, which are back to the right side of that slide around minimizing your premiums. Those are some of the fundamental practices you need to have in place and still have insurance, right?
Right, exactly. So we're talking a little bit about best practices. Oh, wait, poll question number 2. It's time for that. Steve, you want to give us that question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very important to note the cyber insurance companies, they're not built on winners. They're looking to get out of paying you. So it's very important to have a lot of these layers in place. Second poll question, though, is how well does your current technology support your mission goals? Remember, these are anonymous, so nobody's going to be looking over them. Take a second to give us your opinion.
Exactly. Poorly not sure. Great. Well, thanks for answering that. Again, I think that's pretty, representative of what we see across the organizations that we work with as well. This is an area that a professional can help. We actually just did an engagement for a nonprofit organization where we're going in and we're helping them identify kind of what are their missions goals, right? Their objectives, and then how well is technology supporting that goal, as well as looking for efficiency improvements, automation improvements that can maybe allow their dollar to go further, get some manual things out of the environment so that their people can focus on making sure that they're meeting the mission successfully. So great, thanks for answering that.
Don't forget, if you're looking for CTE credit, the code is 249. That's 249.
All right, so we'll try and go through some of these pretty quickly. So we got time for some AI and some questions at the end here. I do think that budget obviously is important for nonprofits, right? We all understand, especially with some of the change out there and funding of nonprofit here recently. Managing your budget is important. Some things that can help you with that is managing your life cycle of your hardware and software, understanding the age, how long you want those devices and softwares to last, and when you need to start refreshing those on a regular basis so you don't have to worry as much about forklift upgrades or large unexpected expenses throughout the life cycle of that equipment. Manage all of your expenses, recurring fees, and projects. So try and get those all documented and understand what all your expenses are as it relates to IT. And one way to do that is to kind of create a 3-year budget. And now that I think about it, we didn't have this in a handout, and maybe we can throw this in. We have a spreadsheet that we use for our clients that helps them build out that 3-year budget. Maybe we can get that over to the attendees here as well as a follow-up item. But this really helps you understand what all your costs are over a 3-year period that can help you manage that budget for you, so you at least know what you're spending on IT. It also helps you kind of visualize where you're spending that money and evaluate whether or not that money is actually helping you accomplish the mission of your organization. Sometimes we go into places, we put this 3-year budget together and we go, hey, why do we have this X amount of dollars sitting out here that you're spending? It's really not helping you accomplish your mission, right? Is that something that we can reallocate to do something better with? Next one on the right-hand side, or top on the right-hand side, is stay up to date on your equipment, right? Old equipment and software does have a cost to it that a lot of people don't see. It reduces efficiency and productivity of your team members. It also increases the risk of the organization because as things get older, they're more prone to failure, which can cause outages. And then they're also more at risk for cybersecurity threats. So, you can work with grant sources to modernize those out-of-date systems. And then one thing I want to mention is the Windows 10 end of life in October. We recently did this seminar in person and asked the question how many people were aware Windows 10 was going end of life here in October. I think we got maybe a 50-50 response that yes, we did, and no, we didn't. There is an opportunity here for you to be able to extend Windows 10 to get another year or two out of it. So check with your technology provider and ask them about extended support updates or the ESU program for Microsoft. For nonprofits, it's pretty reasonable. I think the first year is $61 per machine, and you'll be able to extend the life of Windows 10 to allow you to use it for at least another year. I mentioned looking for automation opportunities. That's something else you can do within IT. If you're spending money on IT, a lot of the solutions you're using today also give you the opportunity to have functionality that allow you to automate things. Look for where you can automate within your organization to improve efficiency and productivity. Train your team. The more effective they are at using your technology, the more efficient they're going to be, and the more that you're going to get out of that labor force that supports your mission. A couple of items there on the bottom one is N10, which is a nonprofit organization that has some training opportunities. We've got some list of resources here at the end that you can gain access to take you to that organization. Look at YouTube videos for training for your team, and then Udemy, which is a solution that we use for training our people, also has a non-profit platform that you can access to help train your team. We already talked a lot about partnering with experts, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that one for us, and then just go to grants real quick. So applying for grants, right? We get a lot of questions about what grants are out there that maybe we can access, and I always tell people there's thousands upon thousands of them. But the key is to stay as local as you can, because the local organizations understand better what your mission is, how technology is going to help you impact that mission and impact the communities that you work in. So please stay local where you can, right? There are a lot of search databases out there that you can go to search for grants. Ohio has a big one, but try and stay local where you can. The other thing is your grants don't necessarily have to always be a technology grant to be able to support the technology in our environment. So we work with organizations for any grant that they're applying for, right? We worked with a behavioral health organization that was applying for some funds to support their suicide hotline, right? We are able to help write in grant language to show how technology is going to support accomplishing that mission that grant is tied for. So a lot of times you can tack on technology into any type of grant, because technology is really supporting all types of processes and missions within all organizations. And then working with a partner to generate the technology portion of that grant can be important, right? Having them write that grant for you, that technology piece of that grant, to make sure that it fits that grant application. Okay. Amanda? Just a few resources here. Go ahead and build this out real quick. TechSoup is one that some organizations know about and some don't. It's a great way to get access to discounted hardware and software. If you haven't looked at TechSoup, I really encourage you to do that. They have a lot of different manufacturers on there, but one thing to call out is that each manufacturer has different specific eligibility requirements for their discounts, so pay attention to that. But you can get really good deals on hardware and software through TechSoup. Go ahead and build it all the way out there, Amanda, for me. Microsoft and Google, Microsoft 365 gives you your email, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, and some security administration, and you can get up to 70% off. We really lean towards Microsoft versus Google, just because a lot of there's a lot of extra features within those plans that you can gain access to help automate stuff within your environment. But Google also has a great nonprofit program. It includes some ad grants for advertising your organization as well. And then the n10.org one there that I mentioned earlier for training and resources focused on technology use in nonprofits is a great resource as well. Okay.
Perfect. And Steve, we're going to go into artificial intelligence, but we want to do the third poll question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Travis. Thanks, Jeff. So, which of these is your biggest technology challenge right now? Go ahead and take a minute and let us know what you think.
In hindsight, we probably should have added a all of the above or something.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's fair. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. I'm not surprised at all that budget constraints is at the top here, right? And that's where, you know, that risk assessment from a cybersecurity standpoint and evaluating where technology is supporting your goals can really help at least make sure that the money that you do have for technology, you're getting the most out of to help you support your goals and the security of your organization.
Cool. All right, so yeah, another code word there. Last one, I think, is 126 for CPE. Excellent. All right, so let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, and I think probably just have a few minutes on this topic so we can answer any questions that people have. But so it's a huge topic, right? It's one of those it's a buzzword that's out there. So you know, a lot of us probably think it's only something that the big corporations or the big tech companies are focused on. But the truth is, I mean, AI, it's become affordable, accessible, and incredibly useful for mission-driven organizations of all sizes, including not-for-profits. And this slide just talks a little bit about, you know, some of the things that it can do and what it does, right? You've got your inputs, and then you've got the brains around AI that are reading those inputs, understanding what it is, and giving you some sort of output to help you with decision making and whatnot. You know, for not-for-profits, AI it's not about robots or replacing people. I'll just be real with you, right? It's about kind of amplifying your reach, whether it's helping to staff to be more efficient. Jeff just talked about writing grant proposals. AI can help with that. Personalizing communications of some sort. AI can help with that. Can free up time in a bunch of different ways just to help you better serve that mission. I mean, I like to think of just this topic of AI primarily when it gets to, like, you know, the chat GPTs of the world. If you've heard of that one, I'm sure you have by now. I like to think of it as a co-pilot. Yes, there is a Microsoft Copilot, but I like to think about AI as a co-pilot. It's not here to run the programs for you, but it can help you, right, with drafting those communications, analyzing the data, automating repetitive tasks, all that sort of stuff. And, you know, of course, with new opportunities come new responsibilities. We got to make sure, you know, that AI is producing correct information, not incorrect information. There's inherent bias. I'll talk about that here in a second. It raises privacy concerns, all of those things. The key is, if you're going to take anything away from it, use it wisely, use it responsibly, you know, and use it with a human always in the loop. I'll say it that way. Let's take a look at some of this stuff on just practical ways, you know, that not-for-profits are utilizing it today, what to watch out for, and how you can start, you know, experimenting with it. So if you go to the next slide, Amanda. You know, this isn't a new topic. We're using it right now in many ways in just everyday life, and we've been using it for years. It really got popular when ChatGPT came on the scene in late 2023, right? But like, we've been using AI for years, right? When you turn on Netflix, AI is telling you, here's the last thing you watched, and here's some other programs you might be interested in. You know, Waze, the Waze travel maps app, it's telling you, hey, there's an accident coming up. You know, all of that is artificial intelligence that's being used, and it's giving you different routes to take, right, to avoid that. So this isn't a new topic. It's been used for years and years. Go ahead, Amanda. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but from an affordability standpoint, these AI tools, they've come a long way. There's a low entry cost. You don't have to spend a lot of money to develop your own solutions and things like that. There's some stuff you can do, basic things, to develop certain things on your own. Now, you still need the experts for some of the more complex things. And affordability as well, it's cloud-based and it's got pay-as-you-go pricing. You can get in and out of these deals, right, pretty quickly and seamlessly. On the ease of use side, a lot of these tools are just user-friendly, whether it's Copilot, ChatGPT, or something like that. user-friendly interfaces, you know, ease of use for non-technical staff with simple dashboards, those types of things. It's really easy to use. And I mean, they help just with their broad availability, and they can help, you know, from a training standpoint as well. There's plenty of training out there that you can leverage to get up to speed on these tools. At the end of the day, it's going to drive your mission success. AI can increase fundraising, improve service delivery, can expand your outreach. I mean, you could use it to automate things, right? Automate those repetitive tasks, which frees you up to focus on more value-added things. And then it helps with data-driven decision-making. So no longer are you gonna have to guess on what step you should take next, but data can actually inform and recommend what step to take next. Now, obviously, the human factor is really important there, right? Back to my point around, you wanna make sure the human walks alongside of it. Next slide. I'm not going to belabor these points, kind of talk to them a little bit, but just that engagement side. I mean, you can use predictive analytics. You can, you know, use AI to create personalized outreach, chatbots to help with things, automated grant writing and prospecting. That's an important area from a use case standpoint, as well as just amplifying your reach. I mentioned this earlier, but target the right audiences for scale or at scale. Really, and then that 24/7 engagement is really important, I'm sure, for a number of you, using chatbots, virtual assistants. All of these are artificial intelligence related. That automated content creation, that goes a long way, right? You don't need to spend gobs and gobs of hours creating things. And then we've already talked about the operational efficiency side, but just automating some of those repetitive tasks, just like let's free us all up to focus on more value-added activities. And then I think the most meaningful slide is that next slide, just around things to consider with AI. So AI works best as a helper. It's not a replacement for that human judgment, those relationships, and that accountability. So just make sure, and those 5 or 6 bullet points there, they speak to all of that. Make sure you're using tools that follow good data and security standards. You want to audit, you want to fact check the information that you're getting back from these tools. Maintain that human interaction. That conversation is still very important. These machines and these things behind the scenes, they lack empathy that humans have, right? So empathy is really important aspect to AI. Use it to assist, not to replace. And then my last point too is for your organization, I would recommend creating like an appropriate use policy if you haven't done that yet, that outlines some of these things, best practices and appropriate use for using AI in your organization. Okay.
I think one thing just to add on that, Travis, is that, you know, we get in these presentations, a lot of people are looking for specific AI solutions. There's just so many out there, and every organization is so different, right? That it's hard to sit here and say, hey, you know, this organization did X, Y, and Z, that's going to work for you. So just keep in mind that AI there's a lot of opportunity out there, but it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, on, you know, how well you're going to be able to use that AI and what solutions will be right for you. But happy to answer, you know, more questions around that in the future for people. So it looks like we got about 2 minutes left at this time. I don't think we have any questions. Hopefully that's because we answered them as we were talking and not because we were dry and boring during the presentation. But if you do have additional questions, feel free to reach out to any of us here. We're always happy to help and answer questions and be of assistance to those organizations that are doing the work that you do and impacting the communities in a positive way. So really thank you for your time, and I appreciate you spending it with us, and hope you have a great rest of your Friday.
Take care.
Bye.